it kind of comes back to more development capital that can help you build a bigger pilot plant, that can build out your team so that you can, the more appropriate bankable pieces of a project together so that it'll actually attract institutional capital.
Hey folks, Flo here at Scaling Up 2024. I'm here with Duncan Ramage of Circle Bay Capital. Why don't you first tell us what Circle Bay Capital does?
Sure. So for the most part, I support developers getting projects to the point where they can be financed and raising project finance capital, both debt and equity for them. Okay. I spent most of my career as a private equity investor, Macquarie for a long time, and then a shop called Forum, where I built the private equity business there, and I worked with a lot of developers over the years, and built stuff, and I see where some of the holes are, and I try to help out.
So what are you doing here? Trying to help out, trying to find some opportunities, trying to maybe also educate the industry on to how they can raise capital?
Basically, yeah. And I get invited, so I feel like I got to come.
Nice venue, pretty good food. Okay. Yeah. What do you think is the greatest challenge for the bioeconomy industry in terms of accessing capital?
I'd say it's two things primarily. I think if you have a good project that's well structured, it'll get financed. I think it's a bit of a misunderstanding about what a good project is and the pieces that need to get put together.
So what is that? What is a good project?
There's many pieces. That's kind of the problem. Is contracts and partners is basically the short answer. Like a good feedstock arrangement, a good construction contract with a good partner, an offtake. Technology that's actually demonstrably capable.
Do you find a lot of those companies in Canada?
No.
How would you gauge
so
Canadian companies in the bioeconomy compared to perhaps others in other countries?
I think bio is hard everywhere, honestly. It's not, look, building a wood pellet facility is not hard. Doesn't have technology risk, doesn't have some of the issues that we're talking about, does have feedstock risk and so on. Okay. But these more innovative technologies that are creating biofuels, liquid fuels, and so on, there's just a lot more difficulty in the technology. It's a little more immature. And that's the same on both sides of the border. We're seeing things work out on both sides of the border and some projects not work out on both sides of the border. And it's always been a difficult thing to take, say, wood or MSW and make a liquid fuel out of it. It's a difficult process, right?
Yeah, costly as well.
Costly, and there's a bigger leap, I think, from what you can do on a lab, on a bench scale, and how you scale it up, level. Right? Yeah. There's a lot more things that can sort of fall apart. It's not taking photons and making electrons, right? It's a lot more complicated. So I think there's it kind of comes back to more development capital that can help you build, a bigger pilot plant, that can build out your team so that you can put the more appropriate bankable pieces of a project together so that it'll actually attract institutional capital. And I think the ecosystem for funding in Canada is not as deep as the US.
Limited, yeah.
Yeah. So you need to look for support from the government. Honestly, would be helpful in that really risk capital piece, and your philanthropic capital, which is sometimes family office sort of thing, and sometimes the likes of Breakthrough and those sorts of folks. And hopefully you've had if it's a new technology, it's been brought along by the VC community for long enough that it's actually built something provable, right?
So we're here at the Industrial Bioeconomy Conference. That's really how I think Jeff likes to call it. Yeah. So we're talking a lot about heavy industry, process-oriented technology. I sit as well in the tech world, so more the IT side of tech. What role does that tech, let's say, for example, AI, play in an industry like the bioeconomy? Because I don't really hear much about it here.
That's a good question. So I have an example. So I'm working on a few relatively simple process, but where the feedstock is municipal solid waste. Okay. Municipal solid waste is very heterogeneous, right? It's not, a consistent stream of anything. It's whatever, and it changes day to day and season to season as well, right? And so taking that into a process and making anything out of it is kind of tricky. If you had, and typically what they do is they have what's called a MRF, a materials recycling facility, recovery facility, which uses a bunch of different technologies to sort out what's in there. Optics, magnets, eddy currents, et cetera, to sort of figure that out, to get some sort of consistency in that stream, right? I think AI probably has a lot of applications, in particular in the optics piece of that, right? It's amazing to see some of these things work, just a whole bunch of material flying through, and then somehow it's shooting little bits of air at specific pieces of plastic that it identifies as this type of plastic or that type of plastic, right? So there's definitely a role for tech, and that's going to all be based on learning and get better and better and better.
What about innovation in finance itself? To end this interview, I'd love to hear a little bit about what are some of the latest trends in finance. And I think VC funding has grown over the last maybe 10 or 15 years, kind of become a big trend within finance. What's the next thing?
Yeah, well, one of my co-panelists there was at Front Funder, talking about crowdfunding, right? Which is right down to Main Street level. The access to the private markets has been really limited for the most part to institutions or very wealthy people, right? And so, this whole democratization of the private markets theme has been it's a hard thing to do because, they're complicated investments often. You have to make sure that you have regulatory protections for regular people, and there's typically no liquidity. So all these things add up to a good reason why it hasn't been a great market for regular way humans
up until now.
And I think the jury's still out on how much it'll take, but there's more and more interesting ways of tackling that problem. Basically just the deeper the markets get, you start solving that liquidity problem. The more transparent things are, you start solving the oversight and regulatory issue. We still need to protect, Mrs. Smith and the postman sort of thing, right? But we do that in the public markets. We should be able to do that at some level in the private markets. Anyway,
very interesting.
Tough question.
Yeah, tough question. Thank you for your insights,
Thanks,
Duncan. Really appreciate it.
Take care.